Let's start with a flat line.
A flat line.
I really want you to picture this chart. The horizontal axis is time. Specifically, it's the 22 years from 2002 to 2024. And the vertical axis is reading proficiency.
For fourth graders, right?
Right, fourth graders in America's largest urban districts. So we are talking about the massive engines of the American economy here. New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago.
Houston. Dallas.
Exactly, the heavy hitters. Now, in any functioning organization, you would expect that line to trend upward over 2 decades, especially considering the input.
The input being time and money.
Massive amounts of money. We've had no child left behind.
Right.
Race to the top. Every student succeeds. And by conservative estimates, we have injected over $100 billion into school reform during that window.
$100 billion.
Right.
I mean, that is just a staggering amount of capital. You could rebuild entire cities with that.
And yet, if you look at the chart, the line is completely flat. For 22 years, reading proficiency has just hovered in the low 20s to the low 30s, which means effectively 65 to 75% of students in our major cities are categorized as failing or needing improvement for 2 straight decades.
So despite all the money, all the political capital, all the shiny new initiatives, the actual output hasn't moved an inch.
Not an inch.
And a skeptic might say, well, maybe we just had the same bad managers running the system for 20 years.
But that's the thing. We didn't. The churn at the executive level is incredible. In that exact same 22-year window, New York City burned through 6 chancellors. Los Angeles had 6 superintendents. Chicago went through 6 CEOs. It is a revolving door of highly paid executives, yet the data is completely frozen in place.
That's the terrifying reality here. It hasn't dipped. It has flatlined. Which suggests that the problem isn't the specific person sitting in the big chair.
No.
It's something much deeper in the system itself.
And continuing to run this machine the exact same way isn't just a policy failure anymore. To quote the author we are exploring today, it constitutes immoral malpractice.
Immoral malpractice.
Yeah.
That is a heavy, heavy way to start.
Welcome back to the Efficacy Podcast.
Glad to be here.
Today we are examining a truly groundbreaking paper by Dr. Jeff Howard of the Efficacy Institute. It's called The Transformation Imperative.
And it is not light reading.
No, it's not. And I want to set the stage for you, the listener, right up front. This isn't just another academic white paper suggesting, a new phonics textbook or buying an iPad for every kid.
Right. Reading through this, it feels much more like an indictment. It is a fundamental challenge to the entire architecture of how we do schooling in America.
Dr. Howard's central premise is that we have essentially exhausted the era of reform. We've been doing what historians Tyack and Cuban called tinkering toward utopia.
Tinkering, yeah.
And the flatline data proves that the tinkering has unequivocally failed.
For the educators listening to us right now, the people actually standing in the classrooms, that word tinkering might sting a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
But I bet it also rings incredibly true. It perfectly explains that visceral feeling of initiative fatigue.
Yes, initiative fatigue.
Because every 2 or 3 years, a new superintendent arrives. They bring a new acronym, a new consultant, a new flavor of the month.
Right.
But the actual classroom reality, the bell schedule, the way we track and sort kids, that all stays exactly the same. The compliance systems just reinforce doing the bare minimum.
That is the crux of it. And that leads directly to the core distinction Howard makes. We have to understand the operational difference between reform and transformation.
It sounds like a semantic debate at first.
Yeah.
But when you look at his definitions, it's actually an engineering disjunction.
Precisely. Reform is incremental. Reform assumes that the machine is fundamentally sound, it just needs a tune-up.
Put a new spark plug in, change the oil.
Right. Roll out a new standardized test.
Right.
But transformation requires you to admit that the machine is broken. It assumes the current system is actually designed to produce the mediocrity we are seeing.
It resists structural change because the structure is the problem.
Exactly. And the stakes here are existential. We aren't just talking about test scores on a spreadsheet. We are talking about workforce readiness.
Yeah.
We are talking about national vitality and the survival of a democratic society.
Because if we cannot educate our citizens to a baseline level of competence, we cannot sustain a free, functioning society.
That's why Howard uses such strong moral language. He says serious people can no longer tolerate a wretched status quo.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
That is the scariest part of this whole paper. The results we are getting are a choice we are actively making by refusing to change the structure.
So if reform is a dead end and the machine is structurally broken, how do we build a new one?
Dr. Howard proposes an architecture for reinvention. He calls it the 3 M's.
Mindset, mission, and method.
And we really need to emphasize that the sequence here is non-negotiable. It has to happen in that exact order.
Why is the sequence so important?
Because you can't just jump to the method. You can't jump to the how-to if you don't have a clear mission. And you cannot commit to a bold, rigorous mission if your mindset secretly tells you that the kids can't actually achieve it.
Which brings us to the foundation, the first M, mindset.
Right.
And the enemy here, the thing blocking any real transformation, is what Howard calls the innate ability mindset.
This is the old bell curve mentality, the belief that human intelligence is a fixed asset. It is unequal, and it is dealt to you at birth like a hand of cards.
You are either born smart or you aren't.
Exactly.
Now, I think most modern educators would immediately push back on that and say, oh, we don't believe that anymore. That's an archaic way of thinking.
They would say that. But do we actually operate that way?
Right.
Howard argues it is still the default operating system of American education. He describes this fascinating experiment he does when he speaks in auditoriums full of teachers and principals.
These are people who have dedicated their lives to children.
Dedicated, well-meaning professionals. He stands on stage and he just starts a sentence. He says, when it comes to intelligence, some have it.
And what happens?
Instinctively, almost like a reflex, the entire room shouts back, and some don't.
Wow.
It is baked deeply into our cultural DNA.
And that innate ability belief creates a literal sorting machine in our schools. We set up systems to label kids almost immediately. You have the VS kids, the very smart ones.
Right.
You have the SS kids, sort of smart. And then you have the KD kids.
Kind of dumb. And the real tragedy of the sorting machine isn't just that the adults do it, it's that the kids internalize those labels.
They know exactly which group they're in.
Of course they do. And if I'm a 10-year-old in the kind of dumb reading group, why on earth would I exert any effort?
Because if ability is fixed, effort is entirely futile.
Exactly. If I try hard and still struggle, it just proves to everybody that I don't have the smart gene, so I disengage.
So the antidote to this, and the absolute first step of any transformation, is adopting what Howard calls the get smart mindset.
The get smart mindset is the reality that intelligence is dynamic. It's not a gift. You get smart.
Through effective effort.
Yes. Effective effort drives development. Confidence initiates that effort, and tenacious engagement builds the intellect.
And we have to be very rigorous here because this can easily sound like, a motivational poster in a guidance counselor's office.
That's believing yourself.
Right. But Howard grounds this entirely in biology and neuroplasticity.
This isn't positive thinking. It is hard physical science. When you engage in intense, focused, effective effort, your brain physically changes.
It forms new neural networks.
It is exactly like building a muscle in the gym. If you lift heavy weights, your muscle fibers tear and then rebuild stronger. If you struggle tenaciously with a complex math problem, your brain is literally building the biological infrastructure to become smarter.
But the problem is that the struggle feels bad.
Viscerally bad.
It feels like failure.
It does, which is why Howard introduces this brilliant operational concept. He calls it FADAF.
FADAF.
Failure and difficulty are feedback.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
It shifts the narrative completely. Think about a student failing a geometry quiz. The innate ability mindset looks at that F and says, see, you're just not a math person.
It's a judgment.
Right. But the get smart mindset looks at that exact same quiz and says, this is just data.
What strategy did you use?
Why didn't it work? What specific steps are we going to change tomorrow? FADAF turns struggle from a permanent indictment into a temporary solvable puzzle.
But here is the critical point, and Howard does not mince words on this. The biggest barrier to transformation isn't the student's mindset.
No.
It is the adult's mindset.
He calls it the culture of disbelief.
Exactly. Adult beliefs shape student outcomes. If the teachers, the principals, the school board, if they don't truly deep down believe that all of their students can achieve at a high level, they will never do the exhausting work required to get them there.
They'll just manage the flat line. Because they think the flat line is inevitable given the kids they have.
Which perfectly transitions us to the second M mission.
Right. Because if we fix the mindset, if we truly accept that intelligence is modifiable through effort, then what are we building that intelligence for?
Howard proposes a highly specific, rigorous goal. The mission must be 95% of students graduating at college in career readiness.
95%. That is a towering number.
And we need to define college and career readiness, or CCR. This does not mean just printing out a diploma and handing it to them.
No, it means the student qualifies for credit-bearing college courses or high-level career training without needing any remediation.
No remedial math 101. They are fully prepared to execute.
Now, I can hear the pushback right now. I can hear the administrators in those big urban districts listening to this and saying, 95%.
With our poverty rate.
With our language barriers. With our trauma. That is an absolute fantasy.
And Howard would say that pushback is the innate ability mindset talking.
It's the system defending itself. Adult disbelief literally becoming structural policy.
But he shuts down the impossibility argument with hard data. He points to what he calls the few good schools.
The positive outliers.
Because if even one school with those same demographics can do it, it proves it's biologically and organizationally possible.
Let's look at Brockton High School in Massachusetts.
Sure.
It's a massive urban school. High poverty, huge population of students learning English as a second language. In 1998, their English proficiency was sitting at 22%.
They were failing.
By 2009, it was 74%.
That is structural transformation.
Or look at M. Hall Stanton in Philadelphia. Reading proficiency skyrocketed from 13% to 70%.
And Howard brings up the most famous example, which is Jaime Escalante at Garfield High School.
Right, the stand and deliver story.
But strip away the Hollywood movie version.
Yeah.
Look at the actual organizational data. This was a school in East Los Angeles that was on the verge of losing its accreditation entirely. Escalante didn't just teach them calculus, he completely rewired their mindset.
He instituted Get Smart and FADAF before we had the terms for it.
Exactly. And by 1987, that single struggling public school was producing 73 advanced placement calculus passes. Only 3 other public schools in the entire nation had more.
So it is possible.
It is an established, factual reality. It has been done.
And this leads to the central moral argument of Howard's work. If we know it is possible, because these outlier schools prove it, then failing to scale that success across the entire system is a profound moral failure.
It is an ongoing civil rights issue.
If you are choosing not to do it, you are committing malpractice.
The current low expectations are designed to protect the system. They protect the adults from the discomfort of structural reinvention. They do absolutely nothing to protect the children.
That's why vague goals are so dangerous. If your district's goal is just continuous improvement, you can throw a party when reading scores go from 22% to 24%.
Right. We went up 2 points.
But if you publicly commit to the 95% mission, you are forced to look at the massive gap between reality and the goal. It forces discomfort. It forces change.
Okay, so we have the mindset intelligence can be built. We have the mission 95% college and career readiness.
Which brings us to the third M method.
The actual execution.
Yes, and this is typically where traditional reforms die a quiet death, because the usual method is strictly top-down.
A mandate from the central office.
The district buys an expensive new curriculum program, hires a consultant, and issues a memo telling teachers to do it.
And the veteran teachers roll their eyes, close their classroom doors, and keep doing exactly what they've always done.
Because top-down mandates completely stifle ownership. Teachers are treated like factory line workers rather than intellectuals.
So what is Howard's alternative? If top-down fails, how do we transform the method?
He calls it mobilizing professional expertise, MPE.
And the core premise here is incredibly empowering. Howard argues that the intelligence and the capability required to solve this massive educational crisis is not sitting in a think tank in Washington, D.C.
No.
It's not in a shiny new software package. It is already inside the school buildings.
He talks about the teacher in room 206.
The teacher in room 206. Every single school in America has this teacher.
Right. It's that one teacher who, year after year, takes the exact same kids from the exact same neighborhood and consistently gets incredible off-the-charts results.
I know how to do it.
They have already solved the problem. But the tragedy of the current system is that her expertise is completely isolated.
It's locked behind the door of room 206.
The system has no structural mechanism to capture her knowledge and scale it to room 207 or room 208.
So mobilizing professional expertise is the method for unlocking that knowledge. But how? How do you actually do that operationally?
It requires professional learning communities, PLCs.
Okay, but wait. I know a lot of educators who absolutely despise PLCs. They've just become another compliance meeting where you fill out a form to prove you met.
Exactly. Which is why Howard says we have to completely reinvent them. We have to turn these PLCs into what he calls a self-directed improvement system.
An SDIS.
Well,
Walk us through what an actual SDIS meeting looks like. How is it different from a standard, boring staff meeting?
it operates much more like an engineering loop or medical rounds in a hospital.
Okay.
It starts strictly with error data. The teachers sit down and bring the actual specific work that the students failed. They don't just complain that the kids aren't getting fractions.
They get granular.
Yes. They ask, what exact cognitive error are the students making on this math problem?
So they diagnose the failure together.
Right. And then they look at the data across the whole grade level. And they say, wait a minute, did anyone's students not make this error?
And the teacher from room 206 raises her hand.
She says, well, my kids actually aced this concept.
And in a traditional system, the other teachers might just resent her.
Or assume she has the smart kids. But in an SDIS, the system is designed to learn from her. The whole team asks, what did you do differently on Tuesday?
And she explains her method.
Maybe she used a different visual analogy. Maybe she scaffolded the vocabulary differently. The PLC then decides, okay, we are all going to adopt your strategy this week.
We're going to eliminate the ineffective practice and replace it with the effective one.
And then, and this is the most crucial part, they come back next week and measure the results. Plan, do, study, act.
It's a continuous self-directed feedback loop.
It turns teachers into scientific problem solvers. But
there's always a but.
But this requires a completely different type of leadership. You cannot run a self-directed improvement system if the principal is a micromanager.
No.
The superintendent and the principal have to fundamentally shift their roles. They need to become the protectors of the culture and the mission.
What are they protecting it from?
Distraction. They have to publicly own that terrifying 95% goal, and then they have to be the shield against initiative churn.
So when the State Department of Education sends down some random new mandate that doesn't align with the goal,
the leader says, no, we are focused on this. They protect the time and the autonomy of the PLCs to do the actual work.
The leader clears the road, and the professional expertise drives the car.
Exactly. And when you align all three, when you establish the belief that kids can learn, which is mindset,
right,
and you set a concrete, unwavering target, which is mission,
yes,
and you give teachers the structural authority to collaborate and solve the errors, which is method.
That is how you break the flat line.
That is how you achieve structural reinvention.
Let's bring all of this together. The logic in Dr. Howard's paper is incredibly tight, and I want to make sure we distill the essence of it for you.
It really starts with a harsh reality check. Reform mere tinkering has definitively failed. We spent billions for zero result. Transformation is the only viable path forward.
And that path requires those 3 steps: mindset, mission, method.
So what are the key takeaways you should be walking away with?
Number 1, reform versus transformation. We have to stop trying to repair a fundamentally broken machine. We must build a new one.
Number 2, the biology of learning. Smart is not something you are. It is something you become.
Neuroplasticity proves it.
Adult mindset is the primary leverage point.
Number 3, the 95% imperative. This is a moral obligation.
A civil rights.
If we don't set a rigorous, concrete goal, we are choosing to let children fail.
Number 4, the engine of this change is professional expertise. The teacher in room 206 already knows how to do this. We don't need outside saviors. We need structural systems to scale the brilliance already inside the building.
And number 5, systems of belief. You cannot change student outcomes if you do not first eradicate the adult belief that intelligence is fixed, that innate ability mindset is the root of the rot.
It forces a very uncomfortable look in the mirror for anyone working in education.
And that is our call to action for you today. Whether you are a superintendent running a major urban district, a principal, a teacher, or just a citizen who cares about the future of our democracy,
You need to audit your own systems.
look at your master schedule. Look at how you track kids in middle school. Listen very closely to the language being used in the teacher's lounge.
Ask yourself, does your system subtly encode disbelief? Does it operate on innate ability and sort kids into winners and losers?
Or does it encode efficacy?
Does it loudly declare that intellectual development is biologically possible for every single student?
Are we actually serious about transforming the lives of children, or are we just comfortably managing a massive bureaucracy?
That is the ultimate question this text demands we answer.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. Also, visit efficacy.org for additional resources.